Hey everyone, welcome to Coach Cruise. I am your host, Brad, and anyway, today is a very special day because it is the first day that we are going to do our series, today being the very first one, of cruise news, the top 5 cruise news stories of the week. And what a week to start. And so without any further ado, let's get into your top 5 cruise news stories of this week.
I just can't get away from a good time.
Okay, coming in at number 5, and it was tough to crack the top 5 in cruise news this week, and for reasons you'll see in just a minute, but coming in at number 5, Virgin Cruises. Their cruise ship Scarlet Lady at the beginning of this week celebrated their 1-year anniversary cruising. Most of their cruises have been 4 to 5 days, and a lot of the cruises have gone to their special island getaway on Bimini. Anyway, the reviews of Virgin have been very positive for those of you that don't know, Virgin caters to adult-only crowds. There are no children. You have to be 18 or older to be able to cruise on Virgin, and needless to say, a lot of adults really like that. There's been rave reviews about the food, the experience on board, the activities, and a lot of other things. I personally have not yet cruised Virgin, so I can't comment directly on it, but the reviews overall have been very good, and they're celebrating their 1-year anniversary cruising, so that comes in at number 5. Let's get to number 4. Okay, so coming in at number 4 in date only, because its significance probably should be number 1, but Norwegian Cruise Line announced on Monday that they will be the first major cruise line to allow unvaccinated guests back onto their ships starting September 3rd. They are going to be allowing unvaccinated guests to cruise once again. Now, there are some stipulations, and some of those stipulations really are a result of some of the places they may be going to. So, for example, Canada is still requiring anybody that, ports, any guests coming off must be vaccinated. Greece is another one, Australia is another one. So if any cruise line is going to any of those ports, currently, as it stands of, August, 14th now, those guests will need to be vaccinated. Unless that changes, those will be the only conditions. Otherwise, these guests will be allowed to cruise again and board the ships and enjoy what the vaccinated guests have been enjoying for the past year or so. So that is some major news. And so let's jump ahead to number 3, biggest cruise. Okay, so on Wednesday, Royal decided to dip their foot in the lake, and they decided also that they would be allowing guests in select home ports of Galveston, New Orleans, and LA that are unvaccinated and all their European ports to cruise once again. Okay, so again, more major news from another one of the major cruise lines that said, hey, unvaccinated guests, we're getting back to normal. We welcome you back with open arms, and come on back and enjoy some cruising. So Royal decided to jump in the waters, and major cruise news again. Pretty much the same situation as I mentioned with Norwegian. There are select countries and territories that still are going to require vaccinated guests. So cruises going to those destinations, there may be some cruisers that still have to be vaccinated, at least to get off. And in some cases, you may not be able to cruise at all. For example, if you're going to Bermuda, that is the only port. Some of those cruises might be excluded specifically if that is the only port of call that you're going to. But aside from that, it's great news for unvaccinated guests. Now, one thing I will say about the unvaccinated guests, and this is the case with all the cruise lines that are allowing unvaccinated guests, will have to test prior to boarding. In most cases, it's going to be 3 days or less before they cruise. They will have to get a negative COVID test and present that upon boarding the vessel to prove they do not have COVID before being allowed to sail. Now, the advantage of vaccinated passengers will now have, vaccinated passengers for the past year almost have had to get a test within 3 days of boarding the vessel to be legal to cruise. That is one big perk for vaccinated guests now, is they no longer will have to go through that testing. Vaccinated guests, I'm sure, are happy to take the test now if they really wanted to get back cruising again, just so they could start cruising and they didn't have to get the vaccine. So good news for both unvaccinated and vaccinated guests. And so without any further ado, let's get on to number 2. Okay, so coming in at number 2, on Friday, Norwegian Cruise Lines, in response to becoming the first cruise line welcoming unvaccinated guests back, their CEO, Frank Del Rio, said the announcement was an instant catalyst, resulting in one of the 3 best booking days of the year. So it goes without saying that there are a lot of people that were hungry to cruise that were unvaccinated, and as a result, the bookings skyrocketed, and being one of the 3 best days they have had the entire year, including when they just got back to cruising. Okay, and finally, our number 1 news story, not so much because of its being the most important, but more because of date. On August 12th, that was Friday. On August 12th, Carnival then became the final of the major cruise lines to announce they would be welcoming unvaccinated guests back. Now, there are some exceptions to this. As I alluded to earlier, there are certain countries that will not allow guests who are unvaccinated to visit. Some of those countries are Canada, Bermuda, Greece, and Australia. So vessels going to those ports of call, guests will not be allowed to get off, and in some cases may not even be allowed to cruise to those particular areas. If, for example, if you're going to Bermuda and that's the only port of call, chances are you won't even be allowed to cruise, get on the ship, because you're not allowed to get off. But with the exception of that, any other ports of call are open for business, and unvaccinated guests can be very happy. Again, one more time, I will just remind you though, and this goes for all cruise lines, is that unvaccinated guests within 3 days of cruising will have to supply a negative COVID test proving they are negative from COVID in order to be able to sail. Now, the positive thing for vaccinated guests, once again, is that if you have your proof of vaccination, you will not have to test. So that is the big perk for you, and a result of welcoming the unvaccinated guests back. So a pretty positive news week as far as the cruise industry goes. For those of you that have stock in any one of those 3 major companies, either Norwegian, Royal, or Carnival, you probably saw your stock prices going up quite significantly. I know I did. And I enjoyed seeing that upward movement, and hopefully that upward movement continues, and this continuation towards normalcy continues the way it is going right now, at least, well, in all regards, but it's nice to see it the way it's happening in cruising, and hoping in every other facet of life it improves the same way. So those were your top 5 cruise news stories of the week. If I missed one, if you thought there was some other cruise news story that should have been in the top 5 that I neglected to mention, please correct me and put that in the comments and tell me, hey, Coach, you missed this. How could this not have been one of your top 5? I'm going to pick and choose what I feel is the top 5 and basically cater to, I think, what is the biggest news, considering what cruisers and what cruise lines they use the most and things like that going forward. But I'll certainly dabble here and there depending upon, how big of a story I feel it is. And there's any other news that you want me to hit that you feel like, we kind of hear about all that stuff already. Why don't you talk about this? Or why don't you talk about that? Some other news story, like, for example, some crazy things going on a particular cruise ship, if there's a fight, or if some unfortunate incident like somebody went overboard, or there were some castaways or things like that. What type of news stories are you most interested in? Please put that in the comments. And once again, we are a very new channel. We are just over a year old now. We have been growing pretty rapidly, at least by statistics. But I would appreciate so much if at the very least, very least, if you watch the video this far, please hit that like button right now. And I would love so much if you hit the subscribe button if you're not already a subscriber. And that will help me out a lot. It doesn't hurt you one bit, doesn't cost 1 cent, and you don't even have a bunch of magazines stacking up that you're not going to read. It's just a subscription. You hit the button. Hopefully you hit the notification bell, and that will let you know when I have more news stories for you, or cruise news or excursions. I cover a bunch of stuff. So I hope you join the Coach Cruise family, and we will see you later, cruisers.
Don't forget to like and subscribe.
I just can't